tell and roadie.
ロキビト神宮
Go tell and roadie.
Alright, so I recently saw Get Out, and it was excellent. Like, really. It lives up to all the hype. It lives up to that 99% Rotten Tomatoes score, whatever it's at right now. Amazing piece of horror cinema, especially for a first-time director. And what it got me thinking about was the other piece of horror media that I've been poring over all year, and that's Resident Evil 7. Now, there's some similarities between the two, and I think a lot of those can be attributed to setting, and a lot of them can be attributed to genre, but there's some that are really tied into character. And the way they construct the father figures in both pieces of media is amazing to me, and I want to get into that. So, be warned, if you haven't seen Get Out or played Resident Evil 7, I highly advise checking out those first. We're going full spoilers, so you've been warned. As you can see, Dean Armitage and Jack Baker have a kind of passing similarity. There's some similar physical characteristics. They're both balding, they're both bearded, they both have glasses, they're both middle-aged. However, they don't look like they would occupy the same world. Or if they did, it'd be like a zany sitcom where they're always getting in each other's ways, but they're really brought together by their love of killing city folk. And that kind of touches on the fact these are both villains, make no mistake. There's a lot of key similarities. They're both people who live in rural communities in large estates on bodies of water. They both have a kind of platonic nuclear not platonic, they both have a nuclear family, you know, a loving wife, a seemingly normal daughter, and a weird, sketchy son. However, beyond that, they're both involved in a plot that takes away outsiders' bodily autonomy and transforms them into something else using a basement workshop under the oversight of a villain that is hiding in plain sight. Now, that seems like a lot of similarities, and it is, but like I think most of those can be attributed to genre, setting, plot. What's more interesting to me about these guys is not how similar they are, but how different they really are. Because the big thing that divides them externally is class. Dean is a very well-to-do surgeon. He's part of a community that is very tight-knit and affluent. And as a result, Dean is affable. When he's presented to the audience, he's this friendly, happy guy. He makes all these corny dad jokes. But he's also intrinsically weird. The tone of Get Out makes sure to make it clear that he's not really to be trusted. And the protagonist, Chris, as he's introduced to him in this way, kind of keeps him at arm's length a little bit. And, of course, these are vindicated. But the other big, and on the other hand, Jack is the opposite. He is from this squalorous, swampy part of Louisiana. His home is in an absolute state of disarray. He's been reported missing for 3 years. He's violent, just disheveled. Him and his surroundings and his family, they're all quite dirty. And he introduces himself to the audience by punching out our protagonist, Ethan.
Welcome to the family, son.
Now, while first appearances are really important to establishing a character, what's even more important is how you play out that character's character arc. And that's the big difference between these two dads. You see, Dean is an unrepentant murderer, essentially. He is a willing participant in his father's insane body-swapping scheme, and he doesn't show any guilt or ill feelings about the things he's doing. Jack also doesn't demonstrate a whole lot of guilt, especially not early on, where he's just this crazy, constantly resurrecting monster that comes back in more and more grotesque forms. However, he does have a bit of a turn near the end of the game, and that's when it's shown that he was an unwilling participant who was essentially turned into a monster by Evelyn, a little girl he saved that turned out to be a crazy bioweapon created by some sketchy corporation. Resident Evil, right? But because of this, the way we leave the characters is radically different. And what's really cool about both of these characters is that there's a whole lot of foreshadowing in both cases. So, for instance, with Dean, he's uncomfortably close to Chris throughout that first whole section of the movie. He's constantly trying to ingratiate himself on Chris and by extension the audience. But there's this sense that he is not what he seems and that he's very sinister. In part because he's associated with his son, who's clearly a very deranged person, and his wife, who isn't the most ethical practitioner of hypnosis. On the other hand, a lot of the stuff that's shown about Jack seems to indicate that even while he's rampaging around the house like a monster, swinging shovels at you and murdering people, that there's a kernel of a decent person in there. He's clearly in a lot of pain throughout the game. You find notes that indicate that he was a put-upon, if otherwise normal dude. And of course, there's the fact that Andre, in the Swamp Gators section of the game, the VHS, indicates that the Bakers weren't bad people. It's just their son, who was bad seed, as he puts it. Fortuitous, as even Jack is unaware of how much of an evil bastard his son Lucas is. But I thought those were really cool pieces of media that used a lot of foreshadowing and used that father archetype in a really interesting way. And there's actually a lot of other similarities between them. They both have a missing guy named Andre. They both feature the protagonist being stabbed through the hand by a woman. And they both have an outsider force that is communicating with the main character and giving him advice and stuff via the phone.
White people love making people sex slaves and shit.